Okay, so we're going to get started now. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program on the Troy Howard Middle School Seed Program with Garden Coordinator David Wessels. I'm Brenda Harrington, Program Librarian at the Belfast Free Library, and thank you all for joining us. I'd like to thank our co-sponsor for tonight's program, the Belfast Bay Watershed Coalition. The Belfast Free Library has been co-hosting BBWC evening programs on Zoom since 2020, and it has been a fun and successful collaboration. Next month will be our last program of this season, and it'll be on May 19th. And the topic is Once They're Gone for Good, Indigenous Shell Heaps, Climate Change, and Confronting Heritage Loss Through Citizen Science with Dr. Bonnie Newsom and Dr. Alice Kelly of the University of Maine. The listing is both on the Belfast Library website and BBWC website, and you can sign up for the Zoom link there. Before I turn the mic over to Tom King, board member of the BBWC, I want to introduce tonight's program. I want to remind you to please keep your mics muted. And if you have any questions during the talk, please put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. The program is being recorded and will be available on the library's YouTube channel at a later date. With that, I will now turn the mic over to Tom King. Tom.
Thank you, Brenda. And thank you to the Belfast Free Library for co-hosting this with us. And as Brenda mentioned, we've had a great run with this co-hosting, and it's worked out very well. I don't know what to tell you about David, except what he has done with the Troy Howard Middle School vegetable garden is incredible. And he's going to really explain it. When you go back into the history of this, it's been about 20 years that this has been running, and it is sort of, growing in many ways. And I think David has probably taken it to a new level. David's been, in Waldo County for about 11 years, and he calls it home now. And he's been running the garden program for 7 years now. So he's really got himself established. And of course, he's going to tell you about how he uses the garden to teach tonight. So that will be great. But before I turn it over to David, I just want to mention, of course, this is Earth Day, and I'm calling it Earth Day week. BBWC has coordinated with Waterfall Arts and Friends of Sears Island to do quite a bit about Earth Day. And, and the things that we are actually sponsoring, we'll have a movie tomorrow at the Colonial. It'll be free. It's called Wally. And there'll be 2 showings at 3 and 6:30. And I'm going to say, I've never seen this movie. All the reviews are fantastic. And Mike Hurley, who obviously, owns the Colonial and reviews movies quite a bit, said this is probably one of the best movies ever made, not only for kids, but he said adults. It's really a great movie. So 2 of those showings. Saturday, we're going to have a hike led by Pat Gladding on Sears Island. So, and it's going to be, from, let me get the actual, time of that. And it's going to be at 10 a.m. And it'll be, a fantastic hike on Sears Island. It's a great place. So take advantage of that, all right? And so those are some things that are coming up. And for further information, check our website, BBWC, and you can catch everything that we're doing and more. Okay, so with that, I'll turn it over to David and enjoy the program.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Brenda. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I was telling Brenda before, I can't believe anyone still wants to go to a Zoom thing after all we've been through with Zooming. But so I'm very honored that you all showed up to listen to me talk for a little bit. And I have a little bit of a slideshow. I have some pictures from the garden. Going to be talking about the seed saving work that we do at Troy Howard today. But I do want to make sure to answer questions. My favorite part is really having a dialogue and answering questions and sharing. So feel free to put questions into the chat, and I'll try to have some time at the end to answer them. And let's see if I can screen share here. Okay, can everybody see the slide?
Yep.
All right. So I work at Troy Howard Middle School, and I'm the garden coordinator there, which means that I am a teacher, but I teach in the classroom that is the garden. So we have 1/3 of an acre garden at Troy Howard and a greenhouse where we grow year round through the winter. This time of year, we're growing seedlings in there, but we also grow through the summer and then do winter greens in the winter for the cafeteria and for the co-op. And the 7th grade is really the grade that runs the garden. So the garden is integrated into their school day. They do math in the garden, they do social studies in the garden, art, science, language arts, and gardening is really a big part of their school week. And so our philosophy is that anything that you can learn, any academic subject that you can learn inside from a book, you can learn outside through hands-on experience. So this is a kind of scary picture, which represents what Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator and theorist, called the banking system of education. So this is the idea that students are sort of empty vessels, and that our job as teachers is to add facts to their brain in order to make them educated. And when somebody acquires a certain number of facts, they can be said to be educated. And obviously, there are a lot of problems with this theory of education. Unfortunately, we still find that it really dominates a lot of schools. And so here's our alternative at Troy Howard that we are in the garden project exploring, which is you can see a little bit different in a few ways. And a few things I'd like to point out about this model is, one, that these kids are outside, and this is really important. So bottom line, no matter what we're doing, can we do it outside in the world? They're also embedded in an ecosystem. So they're not divorced from the ecosystem they're living in. They are relating to plants, animals, insects, elements, sunshine, fungi, all of these different beings. They're learning through participation, so they're not passive as in the banking model, but they're actually actively participating in their learning, and that participation is the learning itself. And they're working collaboratively, so they need to work together in order to achieve what they're doing, in order to achieve their learning, in this case, growing carrots for the cafeteria. So they're not working together because they're told to, they're working together because they need to, and they're inherently motivated to, because it's fun and it's engaging. And then lastly, they're working on something real. So they're not working on sort of an imaginary project created for them, but a real, actual, hands-on, tangible project, which in this case is growing carrots. So this is kind of our model that we're trying to make a bigger part of education. It's still a very small fraction of what education actually looks like in school, but we've found it's very successful and we're always trying to grow it. So today I'm just going to talk about one of the aspects of that way of educating, that way of learning at Troy Howard, which is seed saving. And seed saving sort of grew naturally out of our work in the garden. Our main focus in the garden is vegetable production. We do a lot of flower growing, and we save seeds from all of those different vegetables and flowers. And we've started to dedicate a little bit of garden space just to seed saving. So seed saving used to be very, very common. It used to be that every farmer and every gardener saved their own seeds, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have a garden the following year. And so even, in Maine, if you go back to the grandparents of my students, many of them saved a few seeds. And if you went back one more generation, it was quite common. And because people saved their own seeds, gradually over time through selection, seeds became locally adapted to their places. So in Maine, or before it was called Maine and Wabanaki territory, where we live, the different crops that were grown here were gradually adapted to the soils, the rainfall patterns, the heat and cold, and also the cultures, the tastes, the spirituality and the cultures in which these seeds existed, in which these plants existed. With the rise of agribusiness and monoculture forms of agriculture, most of these locally adapted varieties have been lost. So estimates range from 70% to 90% of these older heirloom varieties of seeds from every corner of the world where agriculture is practiced may be completely lost. And so we realize, and we love growing these heirlooms at school, the beautiful heirloom tomatoes, heirloom beans, all these vegetables that are so beautiful and so much tastier oftentimes, and locally adapted, for pests, for weather. And we love growing them, and we realize if we really love these varieties, we have to learn to save the seeds from them. One, because in a lot of cases, many other people aren't doing it. And two, because if we don't save these seeds, a lot of them may be lost. So we got into it really thinking about preservation and saving seeds. A lot of heirloom tomato seeds. Here we're saving sunflower seeds in this picture. And bean seeds, and then gradually over the years we've been expanding. And so I'll kind of walk through what our seed saving year looks like and a few of our favorite kind of seeds to save. And I think there are lots of practical reasons to save seed, but the more we do it, the more it has a certain magic to it, which is unexplainable. And to do something that our ancestors did for many thousands of years is very compelling. It's hard to explain what it feels like to become a seed saver, but I hope that some of you will be inspired to try it yourself. So early in the school year, which is September, which is the end of the gardening year, we get right into saving tomato seeds. So these beautiful heirloom tomatoes are ripe, and we're delivering them to the cafeteria, but we always remember to save seeds from them. So tomatoes are what we call wet processing of seed. And that means that the seed is embedded in a fruit. And so in order to save the seeds, we have to first squish the tomatoes. You can see the student here with a tomato sliced in half to expose those little seed cavities. And the kids have to squeeze those tomatoes to squeeze all the seeds out of them. And you get kind of a gelatinous, jelly-like goop. But in that state, the seeds actually have these little packets of gel around them with germination inhibitors. And so if dried and saved like that, one, it's too messy, and two, the seeds will be slower to germinate in the spring. So in order to remove those germination inhibitors on the seeds, we ferment them. And you can see all the different tomatoes lined up in jars there with a little bit of water added, fermenting. And this fermentation sort of mimics the natural process of what would happen if, say, an animal ate a tomato and then pooped out the seeds, or if perhaps the tomato rotted over a season in the ground. And those germination inhibitors are gradually worn away by bacteria, and then the seed will germinate at a later time. So we let them kind of rot and get stinky a little bit for 3 or 4 days. And then we've got a process for cleaning them. I think I might have a slide. Yeah, so after the seeds sink to the bottom and all the pulp and the mold and stuff floats to the top, and it's pretty easy to decant those seeds. So you can see a student here pouring off all of that nastiness from the top, while the seeds settle down to the bottom. And a vase of that shape is really nice because you can see the seeds settle into that bulb at the bottom, and it's easier to pour off. So with a few rinses, the tomato seeds are clean, and then they get rinsed in a sieve, slapped onto a coffee filter, and dried, and then those will be ready. And tomatoes are a great one to start with because aside from the fermentation, which is a little tricky, they're very easy to save, and you can easily save a few thousand tomato seeds from a few tomatoes and share them with all your friends. And once you learn this process, I tell the kids this, you have a lifetime subscription to tomato seeds for you and everyone you know. And you can even, if you find a really tasty tomato, a lot of the tomatoes we save are just varieties that were handed to us. Someone said, hey, you should grow this, and gave us a tomato, and we save seed from it, and then we have it forever. So really nice one to start with, tomatoes. See a beautiful artichoke flower in the background. Not many people see artichoke flower, but that purple one, it's nice. So wet processing is good for tomatoes. We also save cucumber seed that way, and butternut squash lately, and some others. And then there's dry processing. So a lot of plants mature seed on the stalk. In this case, this is broccoli hanging here and drying. So if you let your broccoli head, that beautiful head, keep growing, you don't harvest it when it's ready, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and then all those little beads on the broccoli will bloom into flowers. And if they're pollinated by bees or other pollinators, each flower will turn into a little seed pod, and you can see the little seed pods on the ends of the stalks there. So dry processing is really a matter of learning how to notice when a plant has matured enough seed, and you're trying to find that sweet spot where the seeds are mostly mature, but before they start dropping. And with a lot of plants, some seeds will start dropping while others are still maturing. So it's sort of a bit of an art to decide when to harvest them and hang them up. We hang them in our little outdoor kitchen building here. And then the next process is, as soon as they're dry, you have to thresh them. So threshing is another ancient sort of art form for seed saving that all of our ancestors did. And we usually use wheelbarrows we call it whapping often at school. So we whap them into the wheelbarrow in order to release the seeds. So I think we have a video. I don't see my video. Oh, here we go. See if this works. Oh, yeah, so can you hear me while the video is going?
A little bit.
A little bit. All these rowdy middle school kids.
I can hear you.
Over them. So I think we're harvesting Moldavian dragon head in this one, and you can see the seeds falling in there along with the chaff, which is all the little sticks and leaves and bits. Oops. So this is using screens to clean, and this screen is cool. It has interchangeable screens, so we can use different diameter holes in order to clean different size seed. And then just shake it. This is Nigella seed that we're cleaning here. Amaranth seed.
If one seed makes one flower, that's a lot of flowers. Yeah, it looks like candy.
And then this, oh.
What do you want me to stop? I'll be the chaperone.
Jenna, you're killing it right now. In a good way. In a good way.
Go. Wait, I want to go, Jenny.
There we go. So this is winnowing here. So winnowing is using wind to clean seed, and it was traditionally done using the wind in a winnowing basket. Here we're using a fan to cheat a little bit. Okay, so that last process, winnowing, is sort of the tricky part of the dry processing, where we're trying to blow away any seeds or not seeds, we're trying to blow away any leaves or stems or immature seed that is mixed in with the seed. And that's really the trick of dry processing. The traditional way to do this is with a winnowing basket. So you'd actually have a basket full of seed and toss the seed into the air in a light wind. And the wind would carry away anything lighter as the seeds fell back into the basket. And you can imagine winnowing a whole year's worth of grain with a basket that way would have been quite a process and would have taken a lot of skill. We cheat a little bit with the box fan, and you could see in there we've sort of tricked it out with cardboard and different ways of directing the air to make a better winnowing machine. But the basic idea is that lighter things blow away in the wind and heavier things drop. Last year, I had some students, let's see. Here we go. Last year, so we've gotten pretty good with winnowing, and every new variety is a different challenge because the seeds have a different shape and the chaff can be trickier. So we're always sort of trying to innovate and use screens and wind in different ways to clean. Some seed just was really tricky and I could never figure out how to clean it. And last year, I had some students help me in the shop. We built this gizmo here, which we found some plans, open source plans. You know, if you buy one of these yourself, they cost like $2,000. But we found someone online who had rigged one up. And we built this all out of scraps and different things we found laying around the shop. So the way this works, the kids named it the Willy Whacker 9000, which I don't even know if that's appropriate for a library thing, but middle school kids, what are you going to do? So you can see there's a shop vac attached to the Willy Whacker 9000 right here, which creates a vacuum in this side of the thingy, I don't know what to call it. And behind these holes back here control the airflow. So we've got a vacuum over here, drawing air up through here and out. I think you guys can all see my cursor, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we turn on the shop vac, we adjust the airflow to what we like, and the air is coming up through here, and then we pour the seeds down in this funnel. And the heavier seeds fall down through here, through this zigzag and out the bottom, and the chaff gets sucked out here. And so this is really cool because one thing, the turbulent air coming through here really helps to pull more of that chaff out. And two, we can really fine tune exactly how much airflow we want. So this has been a really fun kind of engineering project that grew out of our seed saving work. And I can find the link if anyone wants to build one of these. All the plans are open source on the internet. So that kind of brings us through fall, where we're winnowing and threshing and saving seed. And at the same time, we're harvesting 2,000 pounds of produce for the cafeteria and doing our dye project. So fall is a really, really busy time. And we're basically just squirreling all our seed away in bags as we go through our normal garden week. And then as we get into winter, we can take more time to slow down and spend some time with the seed. And this is one of the reasons why seed saving is such a good match with school garden programs, is that it carries that garden learning into the winter time when there's less to do in the actual garden. So we got our seeds cleaned, and then we have to germination test them. And because we sell our seed and share our seed, we actually have to be able to guarantee that a certain percentage of those seeds will germinate. So in math class, we take random samples of seeds. So we'll pick 40 seeds, put them in a wet paper towel in a warm place, and we'll let them germinate. You can see these are Dakota black popcorn seeds up top here, all sprouted. It's really nice to see germination in January or February when everybody's in the midst of winter doldrums. And then the kids go through and count, and we've timed it perfectly with percentages and ratios and converting fractions to percentages, which is one of the math standards. So we got germination percentages for each of the different varieties of seed that we save. We save a lot of seeds, and we usually share about 25 varieties or so each year that we pack into packets and share. So it's quite a production to go through all the seed and make sure that it's all up to snuff. Sometimes if the germination percentage isn't high enough, we'll go and we'll clean it more, and we'll blow off more of that immature seed to make sure that we have really high quality seed. Next, the kids are working on artwork in art class for our seed packets. So this is one of the really fun parts of the winter seed packing. And I think one of the things that people who buy our seeds really appreciate is the artwork that travels with the seeds. And here you can see a bunch of different artwork on the right, and then kids packing seeds on the left, putting together packets, measuring out seed and packing it. And these seeds go to the Belfast Co-op for sale. I actually have to get in there and restock this week. But anybody can go and pick up some of the seeds that we save at the co-op. A lot of years we do a language arts project called Seed Stories too, which sort of coincides with the other seed packing work, where students are researching the histories of heirloom seeds. So many of these seeds have really deep and interesting histories. They've traveled all over the world. They come from all different cultures, and there's folklore and the stories associated with them. So kids do a little research about that and then choose a seed that they are interested in and write either a poem or a prose piece from the perspective of the seed as it sort of travels through time and space. So that has been a really fun project. I don't know if any of you know this gentleman, Sam Birch, but jumping back to sort of the preservation side of seed saving, Sam was a high school teacher. He lived in Cooper's Mills, Maine, down near Whitefield. And after he retired, I'm sure he was growing beans before, but after he retired, he really sort of went bonkers with seed saving and maintained a bean collection, which eventually got up to 350 different varieties of heirloom beans. So that means, and unlike other collections, you know, in order for seed to be viable, it can only last so long in storage. So Sam was growing out 50 or 60 or 70 varieties of beans every year in rotation to keep all these different varieties of beans viable. And he would share them every year at the Common Ground Fair. This is Sam at the Common Ground Fair, sharing all those different bean varieties. As Sam got older, he had trouble growing out all these varieties, incredible amount of work. And a friend of ours, another seed saver friend of ours, Rosie Guest, who lives near Sam, started helping him. So she and a few other farmers started helping him grow out his beans. And as Rosie took over, Sam ended up wheelchair bound. And so he would pack all the packets every year and send them out to these few farmers, and they would grow them all and then send them back to Sam, and Sam would shell them all winter. When Sam finally passed away in 2017, Rosie took over the bean collection and went through the process of cataloging all of these beans from all over the world, figuring out which ones were viable, which ones weren't, and creating a rotation. And so we signed up, along with a few other seed savers. Troy Howard signed up to preserve these beans by growing them out. So each year, Rosie sends us 10 different varieties and we grow them out. We keep a cup for our collection and we send a cup back to Rosie. And now the Sam Birch bean collection continues, and it's grown by many different farmers and gardeners and seed savers every year, and sort of curated by Rosie. So I just love sort of honoring Sam Birch's legacy, and also the way that his passion for seed saving has outlived him, and that his collection lives on. And I hope more people might get involved with preserving a lot of these amazing bean varieties. So these beans, the beans are another good one to start with. So these are another one that we have been doing at Troy Howard for a long time, because like tomatoes, and I'm not going to get too much into the genetics. Someone can ask about the genetics of this more in the Q&A if anyone's interested. I'm going to try not to go down that rabbit hole, but beans are inbreeding plants, so they naturally self-pollinate every year, and tomatoes are the same way. So what that means is you can grow 10 or 15 varieties of beans in the same area and they won't cross with each other. So you can maintain many different varieties and they stay pure, because it's very rare that they'll cross. Here's some beans. These are what we call the Weirdo bean collection, because occasionally beans do cross. And every year as we're sitting at the picnic tables at school shelling the beans, we'll be shelling, say flag or turkey craw, or one of the heirloom beans that we grow. And one of your jobs as a preservationist, as a seed saver, is to be on the lookout for any ones that are weird. Because what that means is either you had a mutation, which caused the bean to be different, or the bean crossed. And even though beans rarely cross, they do sometimes cross. So every year we'd have a few off types in there that represent crosses that occurred. And we used to throw them over our shoulder to keep them out, because your job is preserving the varieties to keep it as pure as possible. But I just became more and more fascinated with these crosses, especially because we were studying genetics in life science class. And so we started actually saving the Weirdo beans. So these are all weirdos that had crossed with other beans in the collection, and we started growing them out. And lo and behold, you get all these amazing forms, all these colors, all these patterns. Oftentimes you can tell which two varieties. I know the heirlooms so well at this point that you can tell which two crossed to create a new one. And so this is where we started going from seed savers to plant breeders, which is what I'm going to talk about next. So I think this probably happens to a lot of seed savers, where you begin mostly concerned with preservation of heirloom varieties. And then as you work with plants more and more, what you notice is that they don't want to stay the same. Plants cross with each other, they mutate, and they evolve, just like all living things do. And so whether that happens by accident or on purpose, it happens in the garden. And even in more subtle ways, you see variation happening among different plants. And as a seed saver, you're always making decisions about which plants you choose to save seed from. And in doing that, you actually change the genetics of that population. So what I tell the kids is, now that you're saving seed, you're a seed saver. And now that you're a seed saver, you're also a plant breeder. Because anytime you make decisions as a seed saver, you're actually altering the destiny of that plant. And because our seeds get handed down from student to student to student each year, those decisions have real impacts. So I love the garden because, again, these kind of concepts, which are abstract in biology class, are just so real when you see them in a tangible way. Like in this chance cross between a delicata squash on the left and a New England long pie pumpkin in the middle, which resulted in that kind of delicata long pie pumpkin on the right, which grew out of our compost pile. So this was just a chance cross, which we sort of did some detective work and backtracked and figured out which two crossed in our garden. Those were the only two squash of that species growing in our garden the prior year. And you can see, obviously, the parentage reflected in the funny squash to the right. Unfortunately, it wasn't a very good squash, but you can see how new varieties come to be. So more and more, I personally got fascinated with genetics, and the kids got interested in it as well. And so we started doing some plant breeding projects. So one of the 7th grade standards is they learn about heredity and genetics and artificial selection. They learn about Gregor Mendel, which is often how artificial selection and genetics is introduced in middle school. And Gregor Mendel was a monk living in Europe, in what is now Czechoslovakia. It was like the Austrian Empire back then. And he started investigating patterns of inheritance by studying peas. So he was making crosses between white flowered peas and red flowered peas, tall peas and short peas, and finding all these sort of strange patterns of inheritance, which he recorded and ultimately, kind of turned into this whole field of genetics and the Punnett squares. So we said, hey, if he could do this, why can't we? And so we, here we are crossing peas in the greenhouse. I have a video of making crosses in peas, but I'm wondering if I should skip it. Maybe we'll come back to it in the Q&A if we want to. But basically, you pick the two varieties of peas that you'd like to cross. Say, in our case, we crossed red flowered and red potted pea, which is an old Irish heirloom pea called Carruthers purple potted, with a pea called the sugar snap pea, which is very well known. Has white flowers and green pods. And what we got, well, I'll save it in case we want to watch the video, but I think I'll skip it for now.
Hey everybody, so you're learning about
I'll
genetics.
try to skip it anyway. That was from early 2020 when we all went remote because of the pandemic, and I became a YouTuber for a month or so, sending videos to my students from the garden every day. So we'll watch that if we have time. But pea breeding, so without going too deep into the genetics, again, peas are inbreeding plants. So it's really easy to keep the lines separate. And another consequence of that is that all sugar snap peas are basically genetically identical. And so are all Carruthers purple potted. But when you cross them, you get something unique, which maybe has never existed before. Here we have Calendula. So this is a gene pool of Calendula that we created by crossing a bunch of different kinds of Calendula flowers. And I love this again because you can just really see what genetic diversity looks like when you look at a row of Calendula like this. And you can really understand the idea of what is a trait. You can look at petal color, number of petals, the organization of petals, the height, all of these things. So these gene pools are created just by planting all different varieties together and letting the bees and the pollinators come and visit different flowers, and they make all the crosses for us. And then we just come in later and collect the seed, plant it out, and then all this random variation occurs. And now our job as seed savers is just to choose which plants we save from. So with the gene pools, we're really looking for maximum diversity, maximum funkiness, lots of different interesting forms. Another gene pool here of sunflowers. These we crossed 5 different varieties of sunflowers, and all of a sudden we get all these different cool variations, different kinds of colors, different stripings in the seed. Some of them were absolutely enormous. And it's interesting, the black seed was not one of the 5 that we put in our original gene pool. That one was a Hopi dye sunflower that we had grown years prior that popped up as a volunteer by accident, and some of its pollen made its way into the gene pool. And now we have these amazing black seeded sunflowers in there as well. So lots of chance. So sunflowers and calendula are both what we call outbreeding plants instead of inbreeding plants. So they're biologically, they're much more inclined to cross with other plants of the same species in the area. And they have certain mechanisms designed into them to make sure that they outcross instead of inbreed. So with these, if you're trying to preserve a variety, it becomes very, very difficult to preserve a single variety of sunflower. You have to have a big isolation between you and the next person growing sunflowers. Or you have to go through and put bags on each one or do other sort of crazy things to keep them from crossing. But we like when they cross. Here, it's a bit tricky to see, but this is another gene pool that we created by crossing lots of different mustard plants. So these are Mizuna. Mizuna is a mustard very popular in East Asia. And you can see, again, all the variation here: red leaves, green leaves, different kinds of dissected leaves, different shapes and sizes. And this has been so fun to select. One of the nice things about breeding with greens is that you can make selections when the plants are still very small. So you can easily grow 2,000 plants and select some really cool ones without using a lot of space. We can do that still in the greenhouse. It's also fun with these when we're making selections. I like to taste them. So a lot of breeding work now, modern breeding work, doesn't factor in how things taste at all. Of course, when gardeners and farmers were doing breeding, taste was probably their number one concern, and taste is also how we sense nutrition. So farmers and gardeners were breeding for nutritionally dense fruits and vegetables, whereas nowadays they're breeding mostly for shelf life, the ability to ship, and yield, those kind of things. So this is why heirloom tomatoes taste so much better than supermarket tomatoes. And this is why when you start saving your own seed and doing your own breeding work, you can actually create more delicious, more nutritious foods. So mustards are fun because some of these in the gene pool are quite pungent and spicy, like wasabi, and other ones are quite mild. And you can imagine that middle schoolers have strong opinions about that. So we have to taste them as we make selections. Here is an interesting experiment. Potatoes are usually propagated by tuber. So they're propagated asexually. If you have, for instance, a Burbank russet potato, which is the most commonly grown russet in this country, bred by Luther Burbank, it's the exact same genetically as every other Burbank russet potato in the whole world, and they all came from one single potato plant. And they're propagated just by putting more tubers in the ground, more tubers in the ground. But they stay the same genetically forever. And potatoes have actually lost the ability to some extent to make flowers and make seed because they've been propagated this way for so long. But occasionally they do make fruits with true seeds in them. And so we were growing a potato called Magic Molly, which is a beautiful blue potato, and it made flowers. And then it made fruits, which look like little green tomatoes. So we saved seeds from them, and lo and behold, they grew into potato plants. And each of these little piles on the picnic table is one of the offspring from the same fruit. So all of these came from one parent plant. And you can see all of a sudden, all this genetic diversity, which is sort of hidden in that variety Magic Molly, all of a sudden comes forth again. You can see some have bigger yields than others, different shapes, different sizes, and then those beautiful patterns of coloration inside the potato. So again, most of these weren't destined to be the next big, agribusiness potato, but they were all good potatoes. And had we found one that we loved for some reason or another, we can just save tubers from it, and we've created a new variety of potato. So that was a really fun project. And then I just wanted to sort of quickly introduce a few of the plants that we save seed from, that we've fallen in love with, and that we sell at the co-op and share. Because I think, there's the sort of broad practice of seed saving, but really what it looks like is developing relationships with individual plants that we really come to know, come to learn about how they make seed, how we like, whether we like to eat them or we like their flowers. And then, seed saving is just one way that relationship deepens over time. So this is Calendula, which is an amaranth. And this is a plant that we started growing because we had a Jamaican student who would always tell us about stew callaloo, which is a really popular dish in Jamaica. So if you go to Jamaica, everybody loves callaloo. And this is a food tradition that goes back to West Africa and was brought to Jamaica with the slave trade. And callaloo is a popular dish all over West Africa and all over the Caribbean, on all the different islands. And there are different regional variations and even different plants that are used, different varieties of amaranth like this one, or taro, or originally in West Africa, different kinds of tropical plants. But this tradition survived the Middle Passage, survived years of enslavement on plantations, and that African diaspora kept this culinary tradition, gardening tradition, and seed saving tradition alive within all those contexts, which is really just amazing to consider. And so callaloo continues to be really popular. It's the plant is incredibly vigorous and really nutritious. It's a superfood. It's sort of like on that hairy edge between a weed and a vegetable. So it's very good at propagating itself, very good at growing in disturbed habitats, which humans tend to create, and really delicious. This is Moldavian dragonhead, is a plant that we got from Frank Morton out on the West Coast. And this is a really cool old European plant. It's in the mint family, and it makes a really wonderful lemony tea. I'm actually drinking it right now. It's the favorite, hands down favorite plant in our garden of the bees. And it smells incredible, and it dries into a really nice tea. And this is another one that nobody was growing around here. It's really easy to save seed from, and really just a lovely plant to add to your garden. Dahlias, we've had a lot of fun with. So these are the big, fancy dinner plate dahlias that a lot of people are familiar with. And again, like potatoes, these are usually propagated by tubers, but we started experimenting with saving seeds from them. And again, that same thing happened where they revert to their more wild form. So instead of these big fancy double flowers, they revert to a more simple single flower, but they have lots more flowers than the dinner plate dahlias, are a lot more vigorous. And we also learned that dahlias are an edible plant. So among the Aztec and the Inca in Central America, where these plants originated, they were eaten, the tubers were eaten. And so we started tasting them, and all kinds of amazing flavors. Some of them taste sweet and almost aromatic like vanilla. Other ones taste like a carrot. And so we've started saving them for their flowers and also doing a little tasting and dreaming about breeding some culinary dahlias again. And then here, some of the more, again, these are some plants that sort of walk that line between weeds and vegetables. They're usually many times more nutritious than the vegetables we grow commonly in our garden. This one on the left is called strawberry spinach, some people call it. Has a lot of common names. Blightum capitatum is the Latin name. And it makes spinach-like leaves, good, nice spinachy greens. It tends to overwinter in our climate, which is nice. But then all of a sudden it just changes modes in the summer, and it sends out these really funky flower spikes, which turn into these really strange fruits, which you can eat, which are sort of crunchy and nutty and a little bit sweet. And then on the right there is Magenta Lambsquarters, which is relative of the common garden weed that many people know, lambsquarters. Again, a superfood, super nutritious. And this variety though has this really amazing magenta color and gets like as tall as me. It's much slower to go to seed. And if you don't let it go to seed, it won't become a problem in your garden. We have let ours sort of naturalize, so it comes up staggered throughout the year, and we eat it all summer long at the summer program in salads and cooking. So these are some really cool, sort of less common plants that we save seed from now and share. And then I just wanted to throw a few resources if anyone is interested in seed saving or plant breeding, or developing a deeper relationship with the seeds and the histories of some of the plants we grow. Breed Your Own Vegetable Varieties is a really good book if you want to get into the plant breeding side of things. And then Martine Prechtel is an amazing writer who lived among in Mayan villages in Guatemala for a long time. So if you want to sort of get a better picture of what all of our kind of indigenous roots of our seed saving cultures looked like and still look like a lot of places, that's a really amazing book. And then the next three are just really nice resources for, reference books for seed saving if you want to start, saving one or two varieties from your garden just to get into it. And then some sources down below for seed savers and seed companies that beyond kind of the ordinary places to get seed from. So that's all I've got, and happy to open it up for questions.
All right, thank you so much, David.
Yeah.
I have one question in the chat, and then we'll open it up to others. So Barbara asked, are you still working on dehybridizing sun gold tomatoes, and have you had any success?
You're gonna hold my feet to the fire here. We are not still working on that. We finally gave up and decided it was impossible. Although I could go back into the archives and find some of those seeds if anyone wants to take over, but the way that hybrids are created, for just a little background, is that you take a plant like a tomato that's an inbreeder, and you breed two separate lines of plants, and then that are inbred and are kept secret, and then you cross them, and that creates a hybrid. And one of the reasons that seed companies like developing hybrids is that, and so sun gold is a good example. If you save seeds from a sun gold tomato, you will get beautiful tomato plants, but none of them will be sun golds. They'll be all over the map. Some of them are red and some of them are yellow. Most of them are not very good. And you can't put the sun gold back together. It's like Humpty Dumpty. And so only the seed company has those two parent lines in secret, and often they're crossed in greenhouses on the other side of the world in very secret conditions, because they don't want anyone to get their hands on those two parent lines. So there's a process called dehybridizing, where you actually grow out the offspring of the hybrid generation after generation, and you try to restabilize it, recreate something like that original variety, which people have been successful doing with certain things, but sun gold has been especially hard to do. So
Oh, that's cool, thanks. I have a question about the potato project that you guys did. That was fascinating. I've grown potatoes in my gardens and had seen those little seed things. So you just took those seeds in the flowers after they made pods and saved the seeds, and then did you plant them the next year and they created a full-size potato, or was it a couple of years of planting out?
yeah, so the seeds, the fruits look like little green tomatoes, if anyone
Yeah.
may have seen them, and certain varieties are better at making them than others. And I've been told that tomatoes are outcrossing plants and they won't actually pollinate themselves. So if you find a fruit, it's likely a cross between two different varieties that you're growing. And then what we did, you want them to get as ripe as possible, and then cut them open and squeeze out the guts, just like with tomatoes. Let them ferment for a few days and then clean them off. And then we started them in the greenhouse around now, so like 4 or 6 weeks early, sort of like as though you're growing a tomato plant. And all of those were just from 1 year. Yeah.
Wow.
Those yields. So it was, yeah, I was pretty impressed. I wasn't expecting to get anything like a good, decent yield.
That's cool. Now, do you do this every year, or you just did it that one experiment?
We did it that 1 year, and I think I'll try it again this year. Oh no, we've done it 2 years in a row now.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think I'll do it again. Yeah.
That's
we had
great.
one, we have really bad scab
Ooh,
in our
yeah.
garden, which is a fungal disease that affects potatoes. And all the potatoes had scab on them, except there was one pink one that was just perfectly scab free, every single fruit. And so I was so excited, like, wow, this is a scab resistant potato, which there are varying levels of scab resistance, but this was like off the charts. And then I brought it home and ate it, and it wasn't a very good potato, unfortunately. But if we had unlimited resources, we could then start breeding with that potato and breed that scab resistance into another one. So it's fun to see what pops up.
That's fascinating. Does anybody else have a question? You can go ahead and unmute and go ahead and ask it. I can't see everybody, so I don't know what they're doing. Let me see, go to gallery. Any other questions?
Can I ask one, not about seed saving, but what the summer program is now?
Yeah, so I have a middle school summer program where it's open to all middle schoolers. It's free. It's supported by the Belfast Garden Club, and kids come 2 days a week and we work in the garden, weeding, mulching, harvesting, lots of cool genetic stuff in the summer, because that's when you can really see everything. And then the kids cook lunch out of the garden. So we fresh produce from the garden, and we make pizzas in our wood-fired pizza oven and all kinds of good food. And so that's been going on for a long time now. That still happens every summer. And then we also have this will be our 3rd year now, internship in sustainable agriculture. And this is a paid internship for high school kids. So we're going to hire 5 interns this year, high school interns, who are all kind of graduates of the Troy Howard program, and who get paid to work in the garden. And we do some other art making expeditions and different things. So yeah, if anyone feels like funding, helping support interns in the garden, we raise all that money, just local community folks who want to support a teenager for the summer.
Do the sales, you sell vegetables at the school, right? At the garden, right?
The vast majority of what we grow goes right into the cafeteria.
Oh,
So
even in the summer? Yeah.
yeah, so a lot of our harvest is timed for the fall. So
Oh,
lots of cherry tomatoes and all the greens and stuff in the fall, and lots of root veggies. But we grow all summer to feed the summer program. So lots of good fresh produce in the summer. And then we sell, the only thing we sell nowadays outside of the school is Swiss chard to the co-op.
yeah,
in
and
winter.
seeds, and
And
seeds,
seeds, of course, yeah.
yes, at the co-op. I bought some Tithonias, Mexican sunflowers.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
I
and
was
a lot of
hoping you were
those,
gonna talk about those. I love those.
I love those so much, yeah.
I hope it's
Yeah,
a
a
good
lot of
variety.
those, you know, gene pools and funkier varieties and less common stuff is all for sale at the co-op. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think, you know, sharing the seeds is a huge part of why we do what we do, and a huge motivator for the kids. They take a lot of pride in sharing those seeds, and you know, we sell them because it's just a convenient way to distribute them. But I think one of the things that we're sort of rediscovering is how communities used to save seeds for themselves and share them among the community.
mhm,
And I think that's something, as we kind of relearn these skills, relearn the technical skills that it takes to save seed, it's also about remembering those cultural skills of how we share them and exchange them and talk about, you know, breeding projects and how these seeds are evolving, and also telling the stories of the seeds and making sure that those travel with the seeds. So I'm hoping that, you know, this might be a bit of a catalyst for the community to remember some of those things and rebuild some of that culture. It's really amazing. Stories and seeds always go together. So anytime we're sitting around shelling beans, I swear the custodian will stop by and start telling stories about his mother growing up on Vinyl Haven, and the guys who are mowing will stop and start telling, everyone just starts telling stories, and it's something about
Yeah.
seed saving that it just happens.
that's great. That's wonderful. Anybody else have a question? Feel free to unmute and ask it. It's funny to just see everybody's name. Nope.
Mhm.
Well, I guess nobody else has a question. So thank you so much, David. This has been really fascinating, and I'm going to make an effort to come by the garden sometime. Do you still sell seedlings? That was one other question.
Oh
Or
yeah,
not?
yeah. Probably the last Friday in May, we'll be having a big seedling sale.
Okay,
The
yeah, it's
last week
usually
in
ahead
May
of
at
time.
Troy Howard.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. So, yep, somebody says, thank you. I'm gonna stop the recording now, so